Hello everybody, in today's video I'm gonna be showing you how you can make a cool but very simple copper bracelet. It's gonna look something like this. Before I get started with materials and tools, I would like to thank to all the people who have been supporting this channel by clicking on the thanks button and giving some contributions. And I would like to invite all of you to subscribe to the channel and get more notifications and check out all my other videos too. Let's start with the tools. I have just round nose pliers here that we're gonna need. These pliers here are serrated and they have a little more strong hold than what I normally use because we're gonna be dealing with thicker wire. Also, of course, some wire cutters. We're gonna need tape measure too. A small file for metal. Regular needle nose pliers. These are different than the other ones. It's flat. They don't have teeth. We're gonna also need a small anvil and a small hammer for jewelry. And guys, if you can get a hold of a small drill, it doesn't matter if it's a battery drill or cordless drill or one that you can connect to the electricity, but we are gonna need something like this. It's just gonna make it easier. Whatever I can do with this, you can do it manually, but it just takes more time and it's a little harder. And I have my copper wire here. We're gonna need 14 gauge wire, 16 gauge wire, 22 gauge, and 24 gauge. I will be posting links under the video description so you can find all the materials and tools. So let's start with cutting a piece of wire. This is the 14 gauge wire and we're gonna need about 16 inches. The way I do this is like if I want my bracelet to be about 8 inches long, then I'm going to double that. So 8 inches times 2, that's 16. So if you want your bracelet to be smaller or longer, just whatever you want your bracelet to be, double up. So in this case, my bracelet, I want it to be 8 inches, so I'm gonna cut about 16 inches. I hope that makes sense. So now that I have my wire already cut, look how it looks all curved and kinked and wonky. So I need this wire to be straight, and this is where I'm going to need my drill, the one I was mentioning at the beginning. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to attach the wire to the tip of the drill and make sure it's tight as much as I can. And what I'm going to do next is just grab my pliers and squeeze the end of this wire. This is what I wanted, the pliers with teeth to get a better hold of it. And then I'm going to start spinning my drill about 2 to 3 seconds. You don't want to spin it too much because we don't want to damage the wire. But now I've done this, we have a perfectly straight piece of wire. That's a trick that I learned and it's very useful. The next step will be to find where exactly the middle on this wire is. So my wire is 16 inches. So I'm going to put a mark where the 8 inches are. And I'm going to use my needle nose pliers and fold it in half like this. And then with my needle nose pliers, I'm going to take both ends and I'm going to cross them in opposite directions to form a loop like that. Now that I've done that, then I take my pliers, my needle nose, and what I want to do is just straighten the wires back down again, making sure that this loop is big enough, something like that. And I want my wires to go straight down. I don't want them to be kind of open to the sides or anything. So this is what you want to achieve, something like this. So what I have here is my 24 gauge wire, and the way I measure how much I'm going to need is, for example, if my bracelet's going to be 8 inches long, I'm going to time that by 4. So if my bracelet's 8 inches long, I'm going to need a 32-inch piece of wire. Sometimes I don't measure it. What you see me doing here is just folding it 4 times, and that will give me about 32 inches. You're gonna have extra, but what I want to do here is just save me some time by trying to measure everything. So I just fold it 4 times, and that's about 32 inches. So we're gonna need 4 pieces like this one, about 32 inches. So I have my 4 pieces here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So yeah, whatever your bracelet measures, 7 inches or 8 inches, just multiply it by 4. So what I'm doing now is loading the wires onto my bracelet. These are the core wires. I'm gonna load the weaving wires. So what I want to do is introduce one of the wires right there and fold it in half and make a loop with it. Now the next wire is going to go on the opposite side, on the other wire, kind of staggered. So one wire goes on one of the pieces like this one, and the next one's gonna be on the other side like that, and so on. The next one's gonna be on your left wire and the other one on your right. Then I turn it around, and now we're going to start weaving our wires. And this is a very basic and simple technique. I'm gonna take the wire on the very back, and I'm going to bring it across and in between the 2 tips, the 2 core wires, and then you see that's what it looks like. And then I'm gonna grab the wire on the opposite side, the very back wire, and I'm going to just make it go through in between the 2 core wires like that. It's very simple. This is going to be a very repetitive process. Now I take the wire that is next, cross it, and make it go through the middle, making sure that I always grab the correct wire. You don't want to grab the one in front of it. It's always the very back wire. Now I do the same thing. Notice how they are looking in like a diagonal position. I take the other wire and I make it go through. Just continue the process. Same thing. So maybe you want to practice this for a little bit, and then once you feel confident, you just keep going and going. I'm showing you how much I've done so far to save some times. And look at how the wires want to, normally by the nature, they want to like separate itself, and notice how this end is a little thinner and it's going wider and wider. So we don't want that. So what you can do is just, once you have done a little bit of weaving, push the wires together and pull the wires apart to kind of close the gap. You could also use your pliers to push the 2 thicker wires together, just making sure that they are all looking straight and not like getting wider and wider as you're going, because it normally wants to do that by itself. So I'm using my pliers here and I'm continuing the process. And always make sure that you grab the wire in the very back. Do not jump wires, because your weaving is going to look kind of weird if you take the wrong wire. So always make sure that you take the correct wire, always the one in the very back on both sides. So I'm going to grab this wire and I'm going to continue. And here's what it looks like. I've done this much and it's looking pretty nice. I've been constantly, every inch or 2 inches that I weave, I'm going to squeeze it with my pliers, making sure that they look straight and not like getting wider. I'm showing you almost the last inch or 2 that I'm going to weave, and I'm just doing the same process. And like I said, you're gonna have a little bit of extra, but that's good because it helps you weave faster and not having to like kind of struggle by weaving it, because the wires are getting shorter, and the shorter they get, the harder it gets to weave. So here we go. Now I want you to pay attention to this process, because over here I'm going to close the wire, and instead of just bringing the wire and just leaving it there in the middle, what I'm going to do to close is bringing it back up like this. See, it's going to be pointing up. So here we go again. Instead of just bringing it across and just leave it there, we're just going to bring it back on the same wire and point it up like that. I'm going to show you again. Bring the wire and do not cross it, just bring it around it and point it up. This is how you close the bracelet, so we don't have tips or ends pointing down, because that can touch the skin and it could be a little uncomfortable. So we always want the wires to be pointing up, away from the skin. And this is what it looks like once I've done all 4 wires on each side. So I'm just going to use my cutters and cut as close as possible to close to the wires like this, and you can see the ends sticking out. So all I'm gonna do is tuck them in, and don't worry too much about them right now, because we're going to file them at the end, making sure that they are not touching the skin or getting hung up on clothes or on your own hairs or whatever. So we're going to always try to tuck them in, and then at the end we're going to file them down with our little metal file. But I'm gonna do as much as I can with it right now, just pointing them down, squeezing them and tucking them in. And so now what I'm going to do is take one piece of my 22 gauge wire, and I'm going to pair it up right next to my bracelet. And you see how the tip is at the very end, and I'm going to bring it down all the way to the other side, and I'm going to fold that in half. So basically this is whatever your bracelet measures, just double it up. Now I'm going to take my pliers and I'm going to make a small little gap right in between the wires that we started with, not at the end but at the beginning. And I'm going to take the wire that I just cut, this is a 22 wire, and I'm going to make it go through just like that. This is a 22 gauge, just to secure it, and I'm gonna pull straight on it to just make sure it doesn't have any kinks or anything. And then I'm gonna take my drill again. I'm taking my drill and I'm gonna secure the ends inside the tip of the drill. Make sure they're really tight, that they don't slip out, because it can ruin everything. So just make sure it's tight. Get a good hold of the end with your hands and very slowly start spinning. Start twisting the wire. Don't let the wires too loose, because they can like scrunch up. Just put a little bit of tension to get a nice twist, just like that, and we're done. Now this is just going to add a little bit of details to our bracelet, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo a little bit of the ends of it, just so I have a way to attach them to the core wires. So I'm going to undo the wires and make them go in between the 2 thicker wires, pull one to each side, and I'm just going to wrap it around it maybe 1 or 2 times just to secure it. And always the tips are going to be pointing up, away from the bottom of your bracelet, so they don't touch the skin. So this is the top, and the points have to be pointing up. And like we always say, we make sure that the tips are tucked in. We'll file them again at the end, just making sure that they don't have sharp ends. And this is what you should have so far. Now I'm going to bring my little anvil here and my hammer, and I'm going to place my wire here, my wire bracelet, and I'm going to give it a few hits with the hammer. Nothing too crazy. Don't Don't try too hard. Don't hit it too hard. It's just to flatten the wires a little bit. If we put too much force on every time we hit it, we might actually damage the wires. So it's just a little bit of flattening the wires so they look a little better. Now we're gonna make the clasp for our bracelet, and we're gonna use our 16 gauge wire. And I normally cut about 2.5 or 3 inches. Maybe 2.5 should be good for this one. So I'm gonna make a mark here with my fingers, and I'm using my cutters and just cut a small piece of wire. And from here on, we're going to use our round nose pliers to find where the half is, and we're just going to fold it in half like this. And then we take our serrated pliers and we're going to squeeze the center of it just like that, as close as possible without breaking it. And you see how my ends are a little uneven, and one of them looks actually that is sharper than the other one. Is because sometimes when you cut the wire, one of the sides will always look like it's sharp because how the edges of your wire cutters are. So I'm just going to make sure that they are the same size and they don't have any sharp ends like that. See, now they look super even and flat. So that's what we want to get. And now we're gonna take our needle nose pliers and we're going to bend the ends like this. This is going to help us to attach our clasp to our bracelet later on. So all you need to do is kind of fold them into like an U shape, something like that. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna flatten maybe about a half of an inch of this clasp. And what this does is just makes it stronger. After you hammer it, it makes it a little harder. You see how it's about half an inch to 3/4, nothing too crazy. So now I'm gonna take my needle nose pliers and I'm going to bend this end backwards to be able to shape our clasp, something like that. That's what we want. Now I'm going to measure about 1/4 of an inch from where the last wires are to where I'm going to cut the excess of wire with my wire cutters, just like that. And the next one, it's got to be the same size. There you go. So we got this, and it's about 1/4 of an inch. Then I'm gonna take my needle nose pliers and I'm gonna try to bend one wire at a time. Try to use the tip of it, not the very back, because we want a small kind of hook. We don't want anything too crazy, too big. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the other side. And if it's getting a little hard, you can use the other pliers. These ones, I'm just trying to avoid that so we don't damage the wires as much, but sometimes you'll have to. We can file that later because these tips are a little too small to bend these thicker wires, so you can use the other pliers too. Now I'm going to open the ends just a little bit, just so I can't put this through, just like that. And I'm going to fold the ends to close them so they don't come out. There you go. Just try to secure them that they are as close as possible. And we want a little bit of movement on our clasp, just like that. Now next we're gonna close the other ends by bending them in and closing them up to secure the clasp, just like that. And I think we have our clasp pretty much done. So the next thing we need to do is use your hands to shape our bracelet into a semicircle. I think there is some mandrels for this, or like molds, but I just do it by hand. Just make sure that they don't have sharp ends or sharp bends, just making sure that it looks as round as possible. You can do this slowly. Now it's very important to keep that loop where the hook goes into pointing in an upward position, not pointing down, because then it becomes very difficult for you to put the hook in. So make sure it's pointing up, not pointing down. This is a no-no. Okay, it's gotta be pointing a little bit higher up, because then it becomes very difficult to get the hook in, just like what you see here. So always pointing up, or more like straight. Now if you're having a hard time getting the hook to go through that little loop, what you can do is grab your pliers, just put them right through there, and with the flat side just put pressure on it to open it a little bit, just like that. We don't want it to look off, but just try to make sure that it looks flat, and that'll help you with the problem of getting the hook through, just like that. So yeah, that's a small tip that I can give you, so you can do that. Okay friends, and that concludes the process of making the bracelet. Now what I'm going to do is just with my fingers feel for any rough ends or tips sticking up that are going to, or gonna need to be filed away. That way you can wear your bracelet more comfortably without having any problems for like hurting you or getting stuck on your clothes or anything like that. So it's important to go through it and file away any sharp ends. Now once you're done with the filing, just try it on. I'm gonna try to put it on here by myself. So all you need to do is push it, make sure that it can go through the clasp, and there it is friends. It looks pretty cool. And like I said, this is a very simple design. I have other designs that are a little more complex, but maybe we can make another video for that later. Now let me show you what I do after I make some copper jewelry. I always oxidize it, and then I make him go through a process of polishing and tumbling, and I made a video about it, so you can check it out on my videos if you want to know how to turn your copper wire into more like antique look. But for now, I think this is it. Okay, and the last thing, I just want to invite you again to like and share this video, subscribe, and click on the bell to get notifications. And I will come back with more tutorials, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you would like to support the channel, check out the thanks button to donate or contribute to the channel. That would be deeply appreciated. Thank you very much friends, and I will see you next time.